Welcome to AFA Talks, our online podcast that covers everything Albanian American in the U.S. and the Balkans. My name is Doc Vernici. I'm one of the founders of Albanians for America. We are a national advocacy organization that promotes Albanian Americans to engage in the constitutional democratic process in the United States. We also promote Albanian American interests on Capitol Hill by communicating directly to senators, congressmen, State Department, and the administration on important topics that affect all Albanians around the world. You can help spread our message by sharing this video and liking it on YouTube, Facebook, and X. Also, visit our website at albaniansforamerica.org to sign up for our monthly newsletter and to become a member. During this podcast, you can send us questions through YouTube and Facebook chat, and we'll try our best to get to them. This episode, we're joined by Yll Sadiku, a Kosovo-born attorney and former legal advisor to the President of the Republic of Kosovo. Yll is a current graduate student at Harvard Law School. He has deep experience in constitutional law, public service, and civil society work focused on human rights, democratic governance, and the rule of law. Yll brings a rare insider's perspective to Kosovo's upcoming presidential election. We discuss what's at stake politically, legally, and regionally as Kosovo prepares to choose its next head of state and what this moment could mean for the country's democratic future and international partnerships. Yll, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Doc. I am truly happy to be here and to have the opportunity to provide some context about what is happening in Kosovo right now. So I've been following the work of AFA and the advocacy efforts that you are leading here in the United States. And I truly believe that what you are doing is extremely valuable. Albania and Kosovo are the countries they are today in large part because of the diaspora. So history has shown us that Albanians abroad have never remained silent, especially when it mattered. And people thousands of miles away just refused to disconnect from their homeland. And that commitment really made a difference for both Kosovo and Albania. And I hope that as many Albanians as possible in the United States continue to join your cause and contribute to your efforts. Kosovo and Albania has counted on you before, and we continue to count on you today as well. So I am truly pleased to be part of this conversation.
Well, thank you, Yll. It's an honor to have you on the show tonight, and thank you for those kind words about AFA. We're trying our best, and so far things are going well. Let me ask you, Yll, you've served as legal advisor to the president of Kosovo, and now you're at Harvard Law School. Now, how has this journey shaped your view of Kosovo's democratic development?
So I worked in the presidency for a while and then moved to private practice before coming here. And being both in Kosovo and the US has sort of like allowed me to see democracy from two very different angles. So seeing democracy from inside of a young state and then also from inside of one of the most established democracies in the world. So when you work in the presidency of Kosovo, you see how sensitive but also how powerful institutions can be at the same time. So Kosovo declared independence in 2008, and that means that we are a relatively young republic. But we're not operating on centuries of institutional memory, and we are building habits of democracy almost in real time. Every constitutional challenge and then every election that we have, including this one, are part of shaping what kind of state we want to become, right? And then I came to Harvard. At Harvard, you study constitutional systems that have been tested by major events, so by civil wars, by economic crisis, and still have continued to function. So you realize something very important, right? You realize that strong democracies do not avoid conflict, but they are strong because sort of like democracy and institutions always survive this conflict or this tension. And then making these comparisons obviously gave me some sort of a perspective. And I can say that Kosovo has done remarkably well uh, since 2008. We have competitive elections. We always had peaceful transfers of power, and we have a very active constitutional court. Further, many international organizations rank Kosovo among the more vibrant democracies in the region, right? And so, yeah, my journey has definitely made me more optimistic about Kosovo. We are definitely on the right path, but the work is not finished. I have the impression that the work towards democracy and maintaining democracy, it never finishes.
So, from your time inside the presidency, what do most people misunderstand about the role of the president in Kosovo? We don't, in the U.S. We have one president, but we don't have a prime minister. So, what are some misconceptions, perhaps you can touch on that the American audience, Albanian American audience, might not understand as well?
So in Kosovo, we were a parliamentary republic, right? So the president is the head of state, but it's not the head of government. While in the US, the president is both head of state and head of government. The powers that the government and the president has in Kosovo are very different. And because of this difference, I would say that the biggest misunderstanding that people have, also people in Kosovo, is that the president's role is ceremonial. And it's true that the president in Kosovo is not part of the daily executive government policies like in the US, but definitely that does not mean that the president is powerless. So the constitution of Kosovo gives the president 30 presidential powers, and then another 30 are given by other laws. And so, for example, the president represents the country internationally, can return laws for reconsideration, can propose constitutional amendments, is the commander in chief of the security force, and plays a key role in forming institutions after elections. But I feel like the real power of the president in Kosovo, it's not only in the text of the constitution, but it's sort of like we can see that power, or at least the constitution meant for us to see that power in moments of tension, right? So when there are divisions in the parliament, when government formation is uncertain, or where there are constitutional ambiguities, I think in those moments the constitution wants our president to become a stabilizing force. So yeah, definitely the president is not in Kosovo is not meant to govern daily policies, but it definitely protects constitutional balance. And to me, I think that's not ceremonial at all. That's actually very powerful, and it's intentionally in our constitution. And from when I worked there, I can tell you that decisions taken in the presidency can have long-term consequences for institutional credibility and then also for international perception, especially. So I definitely think that the role of the president in Kosovo is very, very important and very powerful, even though it's not the head of the government.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of countries where there are this presidential, where it's just a figurehead, basically, and 100%, the current president, President Osmani, is definitely not just a figurehead, but she's out around the world and working hard and is very close to a lot of leaders in many countries around the world, and she seems very, very active in working hard in her role as the presidency. I guess another power they have, they seat ambassadors. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Because the idea is that that power is linked to the power of the president to represent Kosovo internationally, so to lead the foreign policy. And then the president, according to that power, or I might say there is another power that derives from that, which is to appoint ambassadors as well.
So, for our audience, can you explain how Kosovo's president is actually elected and why it's different from a system like the one in the United States?
Yeah, so I already touched upon, but basically the idea is that the Republic of Kosovo is a parliamentary republic, while the US has a presidential system. And that's where the structural difference also follows. So in Kosovo, citizens do not vote directly for the president. Instead, citizens vote in parliamentary elections. So they elect 120 members of the parliament, and then those 120 members of the parliament elect the president. So the president is elected indirectly. In the United States, it's very, very different. Every 4 years, American citizens vote directly for president, right? And technically, the system operates through the electoral college, but in practice, voters are choosing their presidential candidates directly, and then the candidate who wins a majority of electoral votes becomes president. And as I mentioned, this sort of like difference comes because the roles of the president, let's say between Kosovo and the US, are very different. So, being the head of state and the head of government, such as in the US, it means that the president controls the executive branch. So the president also appoints cabinet members. And executive authority of the US president is sort of like centralized in the White House in that office. In Kosovo, executive authority, it belongs to the government, and that's very clear. Therefore, sort of like the president is also elected by the parliament, but it reflects some kind of parliamentary and constitutional balance. But to get more in detail, so there are some formal requirements that are put in our constitution for the presidential candidates. And those formal requirements are to be a Kosovo citizen and to be at least 35 years old. So those are the only two requirements that are asked that the Constitution asks for presidential candidates. But in addition, procedurally speaking, the candidate must also be nominated by at least 30 members of the parliament. I guess the nomination from 30 members of the parliament in a parliament of 120 seats ensures that sort of like only serious candidates who have parliamentary support can enter the race. And then once these formal conditions are met, the election takes place inside the parliament. The procedure unfolds in up to 3 rounds. So it can finish in the first round, and then it can go all the way through the third round. In the first round, a candidate must receive at least 80 votes in favor out of 120 votes.
To be elected
And that's
president.
to be elected president, yes. So that is 2/3 majority, and this requirement, it's a very high threshold, but I think that it's intentionally high. The idea behind it is that this threshold forces political consensus and then forces parties to sort of like work together to come up with a president that is acceptable for at least 2/3 of the parliament. So no single party in Kosovo has 80 seats. And that means that they have to negotiate if they want to move this process forward.
And how
And
many
then
times have they done this process? It's 18 years since we've instituted the Constitution. So 3 times we've had presidential.
no, I think it's more than that. I am not sure. I think 5 times.
5. Isn't it every 5 years the term, or no? Am I wrong?
Yes, but it's we've done it 5 times because some of the president they did not
Finish the
finish the
term?
experience. Yeah.
Okay.
So and basically in these 5 times, if I'm not mistaken, this sounds about right, but 4 times the president has been elected in the third round, and then only one time the president has been elected in the first round.
Who was the one that
So,
was elected on the first round?
Atifete Yayaga, President Yayaga.
Okay.
So in the first round, if no candidate receives 80 votes, we move to the second round, which has basically the same identical criteria. But if the second round fails, then a third round takes place. And then in this third round, the threshold drops to 61 votes in favor, right? So that's what it needs. The president needs to be elected president. However, in order for the voting to take place, 80 members of the parliament must be in the room, right, for the vote to be valid. So quorum still matters. If
Is there
there is
quorum in the first round? Does it have to be 120 members or 80?
80, it has
So,
to be 80.
so each
80,
round is 80 member quorum.
yes.
Okay.
But the difference is that in the first 2 rounds, the candidate needs 80 votes in favor as well to be elected president. But in the
Okay.
third round, you need a quorum of 80, but you need 61 votes in favor to be elected president.
I got you. Right. Okay.
But nevertheless, it's like, I mean, the governing coalition now has 66 votes, but not 80.
Who
So
has the
definitely,
66 votes right now?
it's Vedvendosia with some other smaller parties from non-majority communities.
So they have
It's at
66 votes.
Yes.
So Vendosia with another a party that they're aligned with can add a member in the third round with just their 66 votes.
With another party.
Yeah,
With another
be it that there's 80 members present.
Yes.
Okay.
If there are 80 members present, then with 66 votes, we technically could have we could have a new president, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that anyone is going to stay. I think that no party will stay in the third round, not maybe even in the first 2 rounds, if they don't sort of like come to a political agreement first.
You're saying that they might not, some parties might not show up to meet the 80 member minimum threshold?
They just don't show up. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't show up, and then there is no quorum for the procedure to start in the beginning.
So we might not even get to a third round, you're saying, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, at least from what's happened until now, if there were 80 people present in the first round, they sort of like there were also 80 people present in the third round. But there are different scenarios that could happen right now. So there could be that we might not even start the procedures because there is no quorum. We can start the procedure for the first 2 rounds and then no quorum for the third round. So it really really depends. It can play.
So let me ask you this: is the outcome the same for each scenario if you go 3 rounds and there is no president chosen, or if there's no quorum in a second or first round? What is the outcome the same for each of those scenarios, which is going to possibly be another set of elections?
No, they have to exhaust all 3 rounds for the next set of elections.
Okay.
They have to exhaust the all 3 rounds for us to go to elections. I mean, we'll get into it, but they're sort of like, the thing is that there is some ambiguity of what's gonna happen, right? And there is some sort of like uncertainty of what exactly happens if we don't have a president by March 5th or latest in March 5th. So the thing is that in the Constitution, there is a constitutional provision which says that the new president must be elected at least 30 days before the current term ends. So that means before 30 days, that's going to be March 5th as the deadline for the president to be elected. But that constitutional provision sort of like does not present any consequence of what happens if that deadline has passed, right? And then on the other hand, we have another constitutional provision which says that if the election process begins and if no candidate receives 61 votes in favor in the third round, the constitution requires the parliament to be dissolved. So that means that we're going to have new parliamentary elections within 45 days, and that's in April, most likely.
That'll be a third one within a year.
Yes, that would mean that we have a third one within a year. So the ambiguity here is that now in practice, there have been a lot of debates among constitutional scholars in Kosovo as well, is that what happens if we don't elect a president by March 5th? Do we go automatically to new elections, or is there still time to elect a new president after March 5th? So I definitely think in order to avoid all uncertainty, the parliament must begin and end the procedure by March 5th, which is in 48 hours. I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, we still don't know who the candidates are if there are any candidates. But the thing is that
So,
I
in
think
historical context, when were the candidates announced in prior elections, presidential elections?
a bit before, even if I mean, I'm not sure, I might be mistaken on this. But definitely, I doubt that we ever went into the 48 hours before the deadline or 48 hours before the process actually took place without knowing who the candidates are. So now we found ourselves, the people of Kosovo find themselves in a position where they don't know who the candidates are, and then they don't also know what's going to happen after March 5th. So the thing is that my take on this is that if the president is elected after the deadline, right? Um, if in any scenario where the process begins and ends after March 5th, I think that that could be very risky for us because that decision of the parliament, so the decision to potentially elect the president, can be easily challenged in the constitutional court. And if it's done after the deadline, I fear that the Constitutional Court might find a constitutional violation in the process. But there is also another opportunity is that if we don't go automatically to elections after March 5th and the new president is elected, the constitutional challenge do not go to the constitution automatically. So you still need members of the parliament to send the matter to the constitutional court. So you need actually people who are willing to to send the matter to the constitutional court, so members of the parliament. But in any event, I would say that members of the parliament should know one thing, that Kosovo people are watching, and sort of like we expect maturity, and we expect people to sort of like come together and bring a solution forward. And members of the parliament, if they're not willing to do this, there is a high chance that they will face re-election, and that's going to be the third re-election in a year,
Right.
and that's
It'll
it has a lot
frustrate the
of costs.
population, I think, dramatically. A lot. I mean, it's a big
Definitely.
expense and a cost to the taxpayer, for another election, three in one year. I mean, they were frustrated, I think, before when we had no government formed for so many months. Was it
Yeah,
8 months? I think that
ever
we didn't have.
since. Yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, I would imagine that, but I don't know. It's similar. In the United States, we have these government shutdowns that occur often, and people get frustrated, and they tend to punish, a party. But I don't know if the population still remembers it, or well, because I say when the election comes around, our elections are set by a timetable, whereas in Kosovo, an election can happen again because of an inability to get a president elected. So could be, if there was another election and we got to that point, when would that be? What is the time frame on that?
I mean, if we go automatically to election after March 5th, if the procedure fails, then it's going to be up to 45 days after that,
Okay.
right? Up to 45 days. And then if there are any options to sort of like begin the procedures after March 5th, it's going to be 45 days after the procedure fails, up to 45 days.
Okay.
So yeah, I think the possibility of having new elections very soon is very real. And I'm not sure that the people, that's something that the people want. And I'm not sure how it's going to play for political parties either. You know, we've seen shifts in votes since it's like between February and December. And that means that the voters in Kosovo, they're sort of like, they're democratically developed and they are not hesitant to sort of like punish one party
Hmm.
and leader if they don't see them as an added value or
Well,
as someone.
you know, when we have our government shutdowns here in the U.S., a lot of times, you know, each party jockeys to position who to blame for that government shutdown. I would imagine it's going to be similar in Kosovo, where each party blames each other, and there's several parties that many more than here in the U.S. on why they're in that position. Am I right in thinking that?
Definitely. I would, the idea is that, I mean, if you have someone to blame, then you have something to use in your campaign, right? And sort
Mhm.
of like try to convince voters that it was not your fault. But the thing is that here it's clear no political party by themselves can elect a new president, right? And we need the wider consensus. I mean, the combinations that could provide the quorum are very limited. And I feel like the political parties, they underestimate Kosovo people. The thing is that it's clear that it's very easy to block this process by anyone,
Mhm.
right? And to move it forward, everyone must come to the table. And then we've seen, I mean, surprisingly, we've seen serious negotiations until now, at least, right? So there was no vulgar language at all. But sort of like we just did not see people coming to an agreement. And I don't know if we go to new elections, if we do elections again, I am not sure how that will play out for most of the parties, right? It's I would say it's quite uncertain for them as well.
You you use the word ambiguity and uncertainty, which is not what we want to hear right now for these elections, right? But that it is what it is right now. Earlier, I just want to backtrack for a second. You said that it takes 30 members of parliament uh, to
To nominate a
nominate
candidate.
somebody. So, do we know how many nominations will be put forth right now, or do we not have any idea?
We don't. We need at least two, by the way. That's also a
Okay.
requirement that comes from a
And
constitutional
have you
case.
had more in the past where there was more than two
No,
nominations? Never.
no, no.
So,
We've had
has it always
one.
that you've had one or two in the past?
No, we've had cases where there was only one nominee, but sort
Hmm.
of like that's was found as a violation by the Constitutional Court. So from then on, we need two nominees, and that's going to mean it's like because the parliament is 120 seats and 30 members need to nominate one candidate. There cannot be more than four candidates in any scenario, right? Because you cannot nominate two people.
Mm.
One member of the parliament nominates only one candidate. Um, but the thing is that only Verkvendosje at this stage has the power to nominate candidates, right? They have 66 votes, so they can, in theory, nominate two people. And no other parties by themselves have this power at this time, at least. We have the Democratic Party with 22 seats, and then the Democratic League with 15 seats, and the Alliance for the Future of Kosovo with 6 members. So none of them can nominate someone by themselves. They need consensus. They need, and then also if somehow they manage to come together without Bedvendosje and go forward with a candidate without Bedvendosje votes, there is just no process that could take place.
So when before when I touched on that uncertainty and ambiguity, so who decides if they get stuck, and is it the courts that make a decision on what to do next if nobody knows what to do, or they're in a position where they haven't been in the past and the Constitution it doesn't necessarily you know uh, describe what to do next in that position? Is it the courts, or who makes that decision on how things
It's
move
the
forward?
constitutional court. The constitutional court. I mean, if there would be a decision, any decision that has some sort of like a claim that it might be a violation of the constitutional court, then someone would need to take the decision and challenge at the constitutional court, and then they would decide and show us what the process forward is. But the constitutional court, it's they usually take a while to come up with a decision. So that would mean that we are still going to get we're going to get to a land to a sort of like a block, right? A
Mm.
block of the functioning of the parliament. So yeah, it can play out in many scenarios, and I really hope that within these 48 hours, the political parties sort of like meet together and agree on a candidate that they can all push forward.
Well,
The idea of the
go ahead.
the idea is that the president is also a unifying figure, is a unifying position in Kosovo. So even if ideally the president would have more support than the threshold, which is 80, right? Ideally. But even 80, even being voted like by 80 people, 80 members of the parliament in the first 2 rounds, or 61 in the third round, that would mean that consensus is there and election can happen, and can begin and end in one day.
It's because when I talk to people, from Kosovo and in the Albanian community, they worry about going into elections and having this ambiguity or this uncertainty, and they think it's unhealthy for the democracy, and it's not something anybody wants to go through. But as a positive note, in the United States, the greatest democracy in the world, we had 2000 elections with Gore versus Bush, where it was hung up in the by for over a month on who was going to be the next president of the United States, the strongest democracy on the planet, and the Supreme Court had to make a final decision on which direction we were going to go. And that election was extremely close, the closest ever. It was really decided by 500 votes in one county in Florida, out of millions that were cast all over the country. And then Bush won that election. But so if people are down about not being able to pick a president right away and having to go to another election, or having the courts decide, it's not as uncommon as what I would say that countries go through and democracies go through.
True. No, definitely. I think elections are very healthy, right? Especially also here. But the thing is that it just wouldn't, to at least my impression is that to Kosovo people, it just doesn't make sense to go to another elections when we had elections on
Correct.
in late December, right? And
Right.
this would be the third election in a year. But still, that's no guarantee that we're not going to end up in the same position as we are right now, right? And
Correct.
then if we end up again in that position, that means that we had 3 elections, and these political parties cannot sit on one table and just agree to move forward. So because the political stage in Kosovo is very diverse. It's it's not easy for one political party to dominate in the presidential process, right? So these political parties need to come together and agree on a candidate.
So, what qualities does Kosovo need most in its next president, politically and institutionally?
Okay. Um, I think that Kosovo president must have some sort of a strategic vision and strategic maturity. So there are some more important elements that are going to play a lot for the next president. So first, the president must, I think, at least how I see it, must understand how to balance two very important realities. And those realities are the national interest on one side, and on the other side are the expectations of our Western allies, especially US and NATO. So most of the time, if not all the time, the expectations and interests are very well aligned. So Kosovo's strategic directions is clearly Western, but sometimes there might be a difference in how to approach a certain issue or what process to follow or when to follow such process. So I think in those moments, we definitely need the president that knows how to act and that is able to maintain the relationship and strengthen the relationship, particularly with the US and NATO. And the thing is that when there are tensions between what the best outcome for Kosovo is, and then what are the expectations of our allies, I think that it all comes down to the question of what is truly best for the people of Kosovo. And what happens sometimes is that people do not understand that a big part of what is the best thing for people of Kosovo is protecting our long-term relationships with allies. So our international partnerships are not separate from our national interest. They are actually a big part of it. Institutionally, you asked, I think that the president must be a model in respecting the constitution and sort of like be a guardian of democracy, right? So the president is constitutionally is above party politics, and as I mentioned, it would be ideal if the president has broad political consensus, broad political support, and that matters just because the parliament is very diverse and having support from different groups, it sort of like creates a balance. So I think the president the candidate that sort of like can meet this criteria, that can function in this sometimes very complex environment. I think that those qualities will benefit a lot for Kosovo.
Yeah, Albanians for America, the organization is bipartisan or nonpartisan. We don't, we advocate for Albanian Americans to engage in the democratic process, but we also advocate for strengthening the relationship with Kosovo, Albania, and all Albanians in the Balkans. And so we don't, we don't have a dog in the fight, like they say, or a horse in the race. And we don't pick, one political party over another. I'm curious, though. It seems like the current president, President Osmani, has built a very strong reputation with world leaders, and has been able to put Kosovo on the map or raise its level of importance to a lot of these world leaders around the world. Even here in the U.S., she seems to have a decent relationship with the president. Uh, do they factor this part in during the parliamentary procedures and debates, or do they feel like it's something that can be done again with another presidential candidate? Because it seems like to me that the relationships that are created currently would benefit Kosovo if it was to continue. But I don't know what is that debate like in Kosovo right now, or is there that issue, and what would be the point against that?
So I think that's actually one of the qualities that President Osmani is known for, right? And I think that's also why in the elections in 2021, the people of Kosovo supported her greatly. I am not sure. So the thing is that there is no public debate between political parties of who can be the best president. There have been mentioned names, but sort of like nothing specific. So I am not sure if this is sort of like a debate on who is the best fit or who has the best qualities, but sort of like it's more a debate who can build political consensus for the process to move forward. And I'm not sure if the work that Osmani has done so far, I'm not sure if I'm sure it's not an easy job at all, and I'm not sure if someone else would be able to do the same. I mean, we have professionals in Kosovo, and we're lucky to have that, and we have people with a lot of experience. But sort of like we still don't know who the candidates can be, right? We have no idea who can be the candidates. Formally, there are no one is nominated yet, right? So as long as we don't know the candidates, it's sort of like it's hard for us to compare one candidate against another candidate, right? And I believe that the political parties started this process properly. They began with serious negotiations, and I felt like there was progress being made. But I feel like those negotiations should have been more transparent, and those negotiations should have started earlier on, and not sort of like, so we're not 48 hours before the deadline hits, and the people don't know who the candidates are going to be. That's definitely not good for democracy.
Right. So tell me, I don't know how much you can comment on this or not, but because I know that you're going back home and you plan to work in government as well. But I've heard the names thrown around a little bit from some folks. Glauc, I think he's foreign minister currently. Yashari member family of the Yashari family, a member there. These two names I've heard considered for the presidency as well. Do you have any comment on any of that?
So I can just talk about my observations from the public information that I read. The Ashari family was one potential option which sort of like brought everyone on the table, and political parties had already accepted that they will stay in the room and they will vote for a candidate that comes from the Ashari family, right? However, the Ashari family, just a few days ago, they said that they are not interested in having someone become president of Kosovo. And after that, there have been the name of Glau Konjusa, which was former president of the assembly and also now is the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the new government. That name has also been mentioned. And sort of like, I feel like he has a high chance. Now, let me put it in another way. If there must be someone from Vedvandosia, right? So if there is no broader consensus, if there is no political agreement with other parties, I would say that Glauco Njufsa has the highest chance of sort of like people bring people together on this matter, if it and this if it has to come from a political party, right? If there is no political agreement beforehand. But I still fear that even in that scenario, it's sort of like if there is no consensus, if there is no agreement, um, other members of the parliament, they just won't show up, and we will end with not even being able to begin the procedures.
What's his background or history with Kosovo?
He has been in the in Vedvendosje for quite some time. So he's been a member of the parliament, I think, from 2011, but I might be wrong.
What
He's
area
been.
is he from?
I am not sure. Like what area in Kosovo?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
no, that's all right.
But yeah, he's been very vocal in the parliament. I mean, especially I think he gained popularity when he became head of the parliament, which was in the last term, and he sort of like people saw him in some tense moments to bring balance and sort of like calmly bring people together. Um, but that alone, it's not going to bring 80 votes in favor, and it's not going to make 80 members of the parliament stay in the room. Political consensus is necessary, and then if we don't have such consensus, I fear that we might go to new elections, no matter who the candidate is.
This is off top. Well, it's not off topic, but I didn't have it on my list. It just occurred to me the minority votes. Is it 20? That's minority votes. Is that correct?
Yes,
What
20.
role would they play in the presidential election? Do they sit out usually, or do they engage occasionally, or how does that work with the minority party votes?
So the thing is that Vedvendosje has 57 seats as a political party, but as a governing coalition, it has 66, right? So those 9 votes are from minorities, right?
Okay.
From non-majority communities. The others, it really depends. Usually, the Kosovo Serb minority does not stay in the room. And then other minorities, I guess someone would have to talk to them and try to bring them at the table as well.
But
Uh,
currently, Venedosia has 9 that are willing to stay in the room from the 20 minorities.
yes. Vedvendosje in total has 66. That's, whoever their candidate is, they will begin at 66, and then they need 40 more votes, which means. But the thing is that here is like, at least the reasoning of Prime Minister Kurti until now was that they're not going to aim for an. It's hard to aim for a process if they only get commitment from 80 members of the parliament, right? Because what could happen, and it did happen in the past, is that if only one member of the parliament fails, right? If only one doesn't show up, right? Then the procedure fails, and we would need to go to elections potentially. So Prime Minister Kuti has framed this as a problem that needs a broader support from more than one political party in order for it to move forward.
I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but why would Prime Minister Kurti not want to support if he? I don't know if he is or is not, but why would he not? You think want to support President Osmani if she's been having this kind of success with building relationships with world leaders the way she has over the past 5 years?
I mean, just briefly on that, I'm not sure, at least from what I've seen, I'm not sure if Prime Minister Kurti has expressed that he's not going to support Madame Osmani. I mean, I've heard his concerns regarding quorum, But I don't know if he's ever mentioned that he's not going to support President Osmani specifically. Um, so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to dive into reasons, into theories on like why wouldn't he support her or why wouldn't he nominate her. I think it's at the end of the day, it's sort of like it's politics, and what we
Correct.
see on our screen, it's sort of like not necessarily represents what goes inside the meeting rooms. And
Right.
that's to go back to my point earlier, is that I really hope that the negotiations that were going on between political parties, they would be more transparent.
Correct.
More transparent. It's like, how do you came to a agreement, or why did it fail? What happened exactly? Because people are observing, right? People are observing, and maybe very soon the people will have the chance to uh, either support someone even more than they did in the last elections, or not.
What is her popularity standing with the population in Kosovo, President Osmani?
I am not sure. I wouldn't be able. I'm. It's like she is, as I told. Like, I think the people know that one of the main qualities of President Osmani is that she is able to maintain good relationship with our Western allies, and that is widely recognized by the people of Kosovo. In terms of popularity, I'm not sure how people. I mean, it's like, I know that she has a lot of support from the people, obviously, but I'm not sure how that support would translate to political power if we would have to go back to election.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed over the few years, both prime minister and the president, they both have a very keen sense of communications. They're able to effectively communicate Kosovo's needs, communicate its neighbors' transgressions. With Kosovo, they're able to stand up strong. Both leaders, I think, and able to communicate that message really, really well to other world leaders globally. And I've always been really happily impressed with that ability. To have a leader that can really break down what's needed for the country and break down what's affecting the country's security the way they do, both of them.
Um, I mean, definitely the things that Kosovo's security and stability are closely connected to our international allies and closely connected to the US and NATO, right? And that's just simply geopolitical reality. And whoever becomes the president must understand that Kosovo's long-term interests, uh, whatever those interests are, should be aligned with maintaining these strong relationships with allies. And then sometimes political pressure pushes in one direction, but short-term political wins, it should never come to the expense of strategic partnerships, right? But I do not believe that any serious political actor in Kosovo would intentionally sort of like weaken ties with the US or NATO. But different leaders might use different approaches. And I just think that we need a leader who is able to tailor those approaches and to push for Kosovo interests, while having in mind that Kosovo's interest is also being aligned with our allies at all times.
So Kosovo's leadership, how should they position itself amid increasing Russian, Chinese influence? Should they engage at all with those countries? Now you see what's happening. Things seem to be spiraling a bit, with the war now in Iran, and they seem to be a natural ally of China and of Russia as well, just like Serbia is. And So, what do you see the Russian and Chinese influence and how Kosovo leadership should deal with them?
Yeah, I mean, Russian and Chinese influence has grown in different countries in the Western Balkans, and in some of the neighboring countries of Kosovo, that influence is actually very visible. In Kosovo, however, the situation is quite different. So Kosovo is aligned with the US and NATO and the EU, and sort of like Russian and Chinese institutional influence inside Kosovo is limited, or if I can even put it better, it's non existent. We are a proud society that follows a Western path. And luckily, also people in high level positions sort of like have understood the importance of it. And I think the culture and the strong belief in the US and other Western allies just has made it very difficult for Russian and Chinese influence to have an impact in Kosovo's institution. So I know that there have been attempts through propaganda and misinformation, but sort of like not deep, not institutional penetration, right? And I think that Kosovo's leadership should just remain firm in its Western orientation and make sure that major strategic decisions, especially when it comes to security, to infrastructure, to foreign policy. These decisions must be coordinated with our Western allies.
What reforms would most strengthen Kosovo's institutions moving forward?
Oh, that's actually a very interesting question. So there are several reforms that could strengthen Kosovo's institutions. But I believe, and maybe this is because I'm a lawyer, I believe that the justice reform remains the most important. So there has been discussions also about constitutional changes, such as electing the president directly by the people instead through the parliament, and that is possible. I mean, in theory, it's possible. We can amend the constitution and have the president get elected directly by the people. But it's not very common for systems such as Kosovo. Usually, when the president is directly elected by the people, the system is more presidential in nature. So the president is more involved in executive powers as well. I know that there have been many ideas, but until now, I just think that there has been no strong political will to change Kosovo's constitution in that direction. Personally, I think that the more urgent issue is strengthening trust and in the justice system, and also sort of like solidify the rule of law. So Kosovo's justice system, just to provide you some context, has two main pillars. So we have the judiciary and then we have the prosecution. And then differently from the US, the prosecution and the judiciary, both of these are independent from the government and from each other, right? So the judges and prosecutors, they have their own committees and then they run their own employment procedures, and then they are appointed by the president. The first term is 3 years, and then the second term is until they retire. And I feel like this sometimes has created a culture of comfort, which has also reflected, unfortunately, low accountability.
So,
So I think
all the judges have 3-year terms, you said?
the first term is 3 years, and then they get reappointed for life.
Oh, for
For
life.
life, no,
And they're
until
appointed by the
they're
president of
65.
the country?
Let me just correct
Go ahead.
myself on the second time when they're reappointed, they get reappointed until they're 65, which is the
Retirement.
retirement age of Kosovo. They get appointed formally by the president, but the procedure, uh,
Are they approved by the parliament or no?
no, they're not approved by the parliament. The procedure to come to the president is is a procedure that's managed by independent bodies. So there are independent committees for both prosecution and for the judiciary. So what happens is that they run their procedures, and then they come up with candidates and they submit it to the president for years, and then until they retire. And then the thing is that I think that it all comes down to rule of law, and it all comes down to people's trust in the system. And I fear that without some kind of reform in the judiciary, but especially in the prosecution, the people will just have a hard time to trust in trust that sort of like the system is dynamic and is actually um, working in their favor.
So you feel like the judiciary is what needs to be focused for reform and change?
Yeah. So in Kosovo, the judiciary and the prosecution are two different things, and completely independent from each other,
Right.
with completely independent bodies and independent oversight. The judiciary in the last few years, we've seen quite some progress in the way how judges are appointed. So it has become a very competitive and selective procedure, but we're not seeing the same in the prosecution. And I think that the prosecution sort of like it's the most urgent urgent body of institutions that we should do something about it. And then, of course, the broader reform would also include the judiciary.
Have you ever considered what term limits might do to help reform the Constitution? I mean, it seems like in that region right there, when somebody gets in political power, they tend to stay for a long, long time. Even here, in the House and in the Senate, we have senators that are very, very old in the U.S. Senate. But at least, the presidency, they say only 2 terms. That's what our Constitution says. So do you feel that, if Kosovo was to, implement, term limits, it might be a simple solution to some of the issues that they're having and bring true reform?
I mean, term limits for judges and prosecution are quite sensitive, right? It's true that they might play well in accountability, right? Because they know that they're not going to be there for a lifetime, so they would want to perform well. But at the same time, in diverse political systems, it's sort of like there is always a fear that those limits would just politicize even more the judiciary and the prosecution, because it would be sort of like easier for whoever is in power to determine, even informally, to determine the way who is proposed for judges and prosecutors. So I don't know if term limits in our particular context would be the way out of this. But definitely, I think that there is a lot of room for improvement and towards the professionality of judges and prosecutors, and then towards their independence as well. And also, I think that sort of like making sentences harsher and making sure that those harsher sentences are actually implemented according to the law. I feel that that generally would give us a more solid rule of law. And then, of course, there would be many differences that would lead to that.
Okay, Yll, we're at an hour. We still have a little bit more time left if you can keep going. I got a few more questions for you. You're at Harvard Law right now, which I'm very proud of the fact that we got a great, and I'm sure there's many more others in a lot of good schools. I've spoken with several of them, but it's great to see you over there at a very high end school like Harvard Law and studying hard. And how's Kosovo perceived in these academic and policy circles in the U.S., or if it even comes up much during your studies at all, or what do you think?
Well, it comes up from time to time. I think is generally perceived in two main ways. So Kosovo is seen as a case study in post conflict state building. So in academic circles, especially in international law, sort of like Kosovo comes up as an example of how the help of the international community shaped a new state. And yeah, professors and students are usually curious about how Kosovo built institutions after 2008 and how the relationship with the US is now, right? The second way I would say, and this is more in policy circles, is that Kosovo is often discussed through the lens of geopolitics. So policymakers here who had to deal with Kosovo through their career tend to view Kosovo as a country that is aligned with the West. And I have the impression that that alignment is generally appreciated. So there is a clear understanding that Kosovo is one of the most pro American countries in the world. And I think that matters a lot because it shapes people's perception positively. So I would say, in general, the perception is quite positive, and it does come up even in classes at Harvard Law School. It does come up, but of course, Kosovo is not seen as a global power, but sort of like geopolitically, it's seen as a very important country in that part of the world.
So, if you could advise Kosovo's next president directly, what would you tell them on day one?
On day one, no. Well, the job that that position is it's not easy. The job is not easy, and then there is constant pressure, and every word that the president says and every decision that the president makes will be questioned by some people, will be loved by others, and will be criticized by many people. And but definitely at the same time, I would say that it's a great privilege. It's a great honor to serve in that office and to serve the people of Kosovo. One thing I think that politicians in Kosovo should work towards is sort of like not being very secretive about the mistakes that can happen in all institutions. So everyone does mistake, and at the end of the day, the president is an individual. And I think that what truly matters in that position, it's how fast can you recognize the mistake, how fast can you fix it, and then the most important thing is how transparent the president is with the citizens about situations that are uncomfortable. In the constitutional sense, I would say that the role of the president centers between in three powers, and that's the power to unify the people and the responsibility to do so, the power and the responsibility to protect the Constitution, and the power and the responsibility to lead with foreign affairs. And that means to make sure that Kosovo remains aligned with its allies. And yeah, I think this would sort of like be a piece that I would say to the president on day one.
So, on the eve of this election, should Kosovars feel confident, cautious, or concerned about the direction of the republic?
I think that they should. There could be a mix of feeling cautious and confident. I think that Kosovo's direction is, people should understand that Kosovo's direction is not decided by one person. I mean, we have a clear national path, which is the Euro-Atlantic integration, and Kosovo's and all the leaders have endorsed that path continuously. And Kosovo's voters, I think, as I mentioned earlier, they're more mature than many people think. So when leaders deviate or show tendencies to deviate from that path, I believe that citizens react and hold them accountable in elections. But of course, this the president is the highest institution in Kosovo, and who is in that office clearly matters. So I would also say that they should feel a dose of caution as well. So a president can shape the tone of politics, can protect the constitution, and then the president influences key decisions. And as I mentioned, especially in moments of tensions. And I think the interest of the people is not a president who simply follows the government no matter what, but also I think the interest of the people is not to have a president who blocks the government for political reasons. So I would say the best president is someone who knows when to cooperate and then when to step in. And I would suggest the people from Kosovo, that right now they should watch the quality of the process, right? What's happening exactly? Who is saying what? And if they have someone to blame, if they think that someone should be punished, if they think that someone should be supported even more, to cast their votes in the next elections.
We've come up to that time now. And so the last question for you is how much longer you have in Boston up at Harvard? And what are your plans afterwards? Are you heading back home? What do you plan to do if you go back to Kosovo?
Yeah. So I have here another 3 to 4 months, and the idea is definitely to go back to Kosovo. I already have a law firm there, so sort of like get back there, and then maybe in the future get back into public service as well.
Well, that's wonderful. Il, thank you for your insight, your service to the Republic of Kosovo, and for joining us tonight on the eve of such an important movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and all the best to you and the AFA.
Thank you. Soon, Parliament will vote, but beyond the vote itself, what truly matters is the continued strengthening of democratic institutions, the rule of law, and Kosovo's alignment with the West. Leadership comes and goes, but institutions must endure. The stability of Kosovo, its partnership with the United States, and its path toward NATO and deeper Euro Atlantic integration depend on thoughtful constitutional governance. At Albanians for America, we believe that an engaged diaspora is a powerful force. Albanian Americans have both the privilege and the responsibility to stay informed, to advocate, and to ensure that U.S. Kosovo relationships remain strong and strategic. If you found tonight's discussion valuable, please share this episode, like it on YouTube and Facebook, and subscribe to our channel. Visit albaniansforamerica.org to become a member and to sign up for our newsletter so you can stay connected to the issues that matter most to our community here and abroad. Thank you for joining us on AFA Talks. I'm Doc Vernici. We'll see you next time. And as always, Miro Pavshim.
Awesome.